Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News. On tonight's headlines. China's Navy conducted a patrol in the South China Sea on Tuesday, saying that the Philippines has been creating disturbances as the Philippine and U.S. Air Forces conducted their own joint mission above the disputed waterway. And we now turn to a deal finalized by the Trump administration, strongly pushed by the president himself.
I said, well, we want something for our efforts beyond what you would think would be acceptable. And we said rare earth. They're very good rare earth. As you know, we're looking for rare earth all the time.
And the news starts now. First, to the Indo-Pacific region, where the Philippines and New Zealand have just solidified their defense partnership. The two nations strengthened defense ties with the signing of a landmark troop pact on Wednesday, opening the way for expanded military cooperation amid shared security concerns in the Indo-Pacific region. The status of visiting forces agreement signed in Manila by Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro and New Zealand Defense Minister Judith Collins allows the two nations to deploy troops on each other's soil, making it easier for their militaries to work together. New Zealand took part in joint maritime exercises with the Philippines, United States, Australia, and Japan for the first time last year in the South China Sea, where Manila and Beijing have repeatedly sparred over disputed areas. The signing of the SOVFA follows New Zealand's unveiling of a plan to boost defense spending by 9 billion New Zealand dollars over the next 4 years, and an aim to nearly double spending to 2% of GDP in the next 8 years. A review of New Zealand's security capabilities in 2023 called for more military spending and stronger ties with the Indo-Pacific nations to tackle issues of climate change and strategic competition between the West and China and Russia. Meanwhile, China's Navy conducted a patrol in the South China Sea on Tuesday, saying that the Philippines has been creating disturbances as the Philippine and U.S. Air Forces conducted their own joint mission above the disputed waterway. China, which claims almost the entirety of the South China Sea, has been involved an increasingly tense standoff with the Philippines in the waters there, as both seek to assert their sovereignty claims. More than 14,000 Filipino and U.S. soldiers are participating in joint exercises which run from April 21 through May 9 for a full battle test in the face of shared regional security concerns. China has said the drills are provocative. In a statement late on Tuesday, the Southern Theater Command of China's People's Liberation Army said its forces had that same day carried out routine patrols in the South China Sea without giving an exact location. The Philippine military, in its own statement late on Tuesday, said the Philippines and U.S. Air Forces had conducted a joint patrol over the South China Sea that day as part of ongoing defense cooperation. The maritime patrol involved 3 F-A-50 fighter jets from the Philippine Air Force, along with 2 U.S. B-1B bombers, 2 F-16s, and an F-18. Responding in a separate statement to the Chinese military's comments, the Philippine military said the armed forces stand firm in exercising their sovereign rights and partnerships with allies like the United States that reflect shared values. The conduct of joint exercises and maritime domain awareness operations within our territorial waters and exclusive economic zone is not a provocation. It is preparedness, it said, and then added, to be clear, the Philippine Sea, the Philippines is a sovereign state. No foreign power can dictate how we defend our home or with whom we stand in solidarity. China's warning against alliances in the region. Beijing says it's opposed to any moves that create divisions or raise tensions. This after Japan and the Philippines discussed China's actions in the South and East China Seas and agreed to boost their security ties. Take a look.
China has always believed that exchanges and cooperation between countries should not target any third parties or harm the interests of third parties. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War. During World War II, Japan invaded and colonized the Philippines and other East Asian countries, and occupied the South China Sea Islands, which is a serious historical crime. We urge Japan to follow the path of peaceful development and act prudently in the field of military and security. We oppose any attempt to form cliques and factions in the region and escalate regional tensions. I also want to point out that China's sovereignty and related rights in the East China Sea and the South China Sea were formed in a long historical process and are in line with international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. China's activities in the relevant waters are reasonable and legal and beyond reproach.
To New Zealand now, where Wellington, the capital, is being hit by the strongest winds in more than a decade. The severe weather has already caused major disruptions, including flight cancellations and power outages. Take a look. Wellington is currently experiencing an extreme weather event. Gusts have reached up to 150 kilometers per hour at Mount Kau Kau, and strong winds are expected to continue through the afternoon and into the night. Authorities have issued a rare red level wind warning, emphasizing that this situation is a threat to life due to the danger of falling trees and flying debris. Residents are being urged to stay indoors and avoid unnecessary travel. And we're also hearing reports of widespread disruption. Around 1,000 homes are without power, and emergency crews are working tirelessly to clear fallen trees and repair damage, particularly in suburbs like Petone and Brooklyn, where some roofs have been torn off completely. Meteorologists are describing this as one of the most intense wind events to strike Wellington in over 10 years. The extreme weather is being driven by a combination of strong southerly winds, heavy rain, and high tides. The red warning remains in effect until early Friday morning, though forecasters anticipate the winds should begin to ease overnight. And we now turn to some dramatic scenes out of Western Australia, where a police standoff ended with a man driving his Jeep straight off a jetty and into the water, narrowly missing a police boat. Take a look. This all unfolded Wednesday morning at Claremont Jetty, just outside Perth. Police say the man's red Jeep was suspected to have been involved in an earlier traffic incident, and when officers tried to approach, he drove onto the jetty, sparking a tense standoff that lasted for hours. The police air wing, water police, and tactical response officers were all called in as negotiators tried to talk the man down. But just before midday, things took a dramatic turn. The driver suddenly reversed, then accelerated straight toward a water police boat, flipping the Jeep off the jetty and into the river. Amazingly, the man managed to climb out through a window and perched himself on top of the overturned vehicle for several minutes, talking with police from the water. Eventually, officers jumped in, pulled him to safety, and carried him off the jetty to a waiting ambulance. Authorities say the man, 32, has since been charged in connection with the incident. Local media also report that he may have been involved in an earlier armed robbery. Police are still investigating, but thankfully, no one was hurt in this wild encounter on the water. In Israel, a dangerous wildfire is unfolding near Jerusalem. The situation is so critical that a main highway has been closed, forcing people to evacuate their homes.
People drove through flames on a highway in central Israel as wildfires raged on the outskirts of Jerusalem on Wednesday. Nearby communities were forced to evacuate as Israel appealed for international help to fight the blaze. Video showed fires burning along the Route 1 highway from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. Footage caught people abandoning their cars and running from flames as thick smoke billowed nearby. At least several people were injured, but there were no reports of fatalities. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Italy and Croatia were expected to send firefighting planes to help extinguish the flames. Israel also appealed to Greece, Cyprus, and Bulgaria, the foreign ministry said. Israeli media reported that at least 120 fire and rescue services had mobilized dozens of teams, aircraft, and helicopters to try to contain the blaze. The military said its search and rescue forces were assisting the operations. The fire broke out on Israel's Memorial Day for fallen soldiers, and many ceremonies marking the eve of its Independence Day were cancelled.
Singaporeans are heading to the polls this Saturday, May 3rd, in a general election that marks a significant moment in the nation's political landscape. And this will be the first electoral test for Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, who took over the reins from longtime leader Lee Hsien Loong in May 2024. Take a look. The ruling People's Action Party, or PAP, is seeking renewed mandate amidst growing public concerns over housing affordability, the rising cost of living, and economic uncertainties fueled by global trade tensions, including U.S. tariffs.
We are in a changed world with turbulence all around, so there is much at stake in this election.
While the PAP has maintained a stronghold since Singapore's independence in 1965, its share of the popular vote has seen a decline, dropping to 61% in the 2020 elections. Analysts suggest that the party is keenly aware of the risks of complacency.
Well, I think the PAP is very, very conscious that, having been around for more than 6 decades, there's always the threat of becoming complacent and ossification. The key stalwarts of the People's Action Parties have been out trying to explain the ramifications of Trump's Liberation Day tariff regime and trying to convince people that it is indeed a very troubling development. Hence, I think it will be dependent on how the politicians try to help voters make sense of it, that you'll see if Singaporean voters feel that it is indeed something that they want to go back to the PAP and say, we want to give you a strong mandate to do what you can to respond to this.
The opposite Workers' Party, led by Pritam Singh, is aiming to capitalize on these sentiments, advocating for a more balanced political system and increased parliamentary diversity. Despite recent legal challenges, Singh remains eligible to contest in the upcoming election.
The Workers' Party has proven itself to be a loyal opposition in Parliament. Loyal not to the PAP, loyal to Singapore and the people of Singapore.
For many voters, especially the younger demographic, issues like housing affordability are top of mind.
You're dealing with Singaporeans who have very high expectations that their lives will improve from generation to generation. And how would you deliver that? The question is, if the opposition comes up with alternative views, how suitable are those? How practicable are those? Can they be absorbed? Are they fundamentally incorrect? And this requires, because of this period of change, very deep conversations that are required, across the island.
As the nation prepares for this pivotal election, the outcome will not only determine the composition of the next parliament, but also signal the public's confidence in the current leadership amidst evolving domestic and global challenges. And we now turn to a deal finalized by the Trump administration, strongly pushed by the president himself. Now, the agreement with Ukraine centers on giving the U.S. priority in accessing Ukraine's mineral resources, with President Trump emphasizing the strategic importance of those materials. Take a look.
The U.S. and Ukraine have signed a deal to give the United States preferential access to new Ukrainian minerals deals and fund investment in Ukraine's reconstruction. On Wednesday, the U.S. Treasury released a photo showing Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent signing the agreement in Washington with Ukrainian First Deputy Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko. The Treasury said the deal, quote, clearly signals the Trump administration's commitment to a free, sovereign, prosperous Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump has strongly pushed for the deal, saying the U.S. should get something for its military aid to Ukraine, a line he repeated before the signing on Wednesday.
So I said, well, we want something for our efforts beyond what you would think would be acceptable. And we said rare earth. They have very good rare earth. As you know, we're looking for rare earth all the time. Rare earth is called rare for a reason. And they have a lot.
Ukraine is rich in natural resources, including those rare earth metals, which are used in a wide range of electronics. The country also has large reserves of iron, uranium, and natural gas.
You're not acting at all thankful.
The agreement is central to Kyiv's efforts to mend ties with Trump and the White House, which frayed after he took office in January. The U.S. has been Ukraine's single largest military donor since Russia's 2022 invasion, and Ukrainian officials have hoped that the deal would ensure continued U.S. support for Ukraine's defense against Russia. As for the fund to reconstruct Ukraine, Sviridенko wrote on X that the deal provides for Washington to contribute to the fund, saying, quote, "In addition to direct financial contributions, it may also provide new assistance, for example, air defense systems for Ukraine." Washington did not directly address that suggestion. It's all the result of months of sometimes fraught negotiations between the two countries, with uncertainty up until the last moment, with word of an 11th hour snag, which Besant earlier in the day attributed to the Ukrainian side.
Yeah, our side is ready to sign. Ukrainians decided last night to make some last-minute changes. We're sure that they will reconsider that, and we are ready to sign this afternoon if they are.
A draft of the accord seen by Reuters earlier on Wednesday showed Ukraine secured the removal of any requirement for it to pay back the U.S. for past military assistance. The draft did not provide any concrete U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine, one of its initial goals.
And tonight, we're getting a look at the latest numbers on the U.S. economy, and it's not pretty. For the first time in 3 years, the economy shrank in the first quarter.
The U.S. economy contracted for the first time in 3 years in the first quarter, deepening concerns over the impact of President Donald Trump's tariffs. The negative GDP figure out Wednesday reflected a flood of imports as businesses raced to avoid higher costs from U.S. tariffs, underscoring the disruptive nature of Trump's often chaotic trade policy. The Republican president deflected blame for the unexpected contraction and said in a Truth Social post that Americans should be patient and that his tariffs would eventually lead to an economic boom. The Commerce Department said U.S. gross domestic product, the value of all goods and services, decreased at an annualized rate of 0.3%. That fell short of the 0.3% increase forecast by economists polled by Reuters. The reading came a day after a separate Commerce Department report showed the goods trade deficit surged to an all-time high in March. Imports jumped at a more than 40% rate, the largest rise since the third quarter of 2020 when the nation was in the throes of the pandemic. That obliterated a modest rise in exports, resulting in a large trade gap that chopped off a record 4.8 percentage points from GDP. Wednesday's report also reinforced Americans' growing disapproval of Trump's handling of the economy as he marks 100 days in office, with consumers' inflation expectations rising. Consumer confidence is near 5-year lows and business sentiment has tanked, while many companies have pulled their 2025 financial forecasts, citing uncertainty over the economic environment. Wall Street's main indexes opened substantially lower after the GDP report's release, but stocks recovered some ground by midday.
And let's turn now our attention to South Korea, where thousands of workers took to the streets on May Day to demand better treatment. In Seoul, tens of thousands of people gather for a big rally organized by the Korean Trade Union Confederation. And here you could really feel the determination as these workers spoke out about how tough it is with the rising cost of living, job insecurity, and the working conditions they're facing under the current government.
Join today's May Day rally with demands for the eradication of deep-rooted injustice, the resolution of past insurrections, and sweeping social reforms.
And it wasn't just Seoul, similar protests happened in 15 other cities across South Korea, including Busan and Daeju. It's important to note that migrant workers were also a big part of these demonstrations, calling for fair wages and better treatment. And we now go to Turkey, where May Day protests turned violent in Istanbul. Turkish police clashed with May Day protesters in Istanbul today, forcefully detaining some and dragging them away to buses. Unions and various NGOs had organized these protests with the main goal of marching to Taksim Square. Now, Taksim Square is a key location for these protests, but authorities have banned all demonstrations there. Police set up barricades in central areas of Istanbul, like Besiktas and Sisli, and when protesters tried to push through to reach Taksim Square, things got rough. Police pushed back and there were scuffles as they tried to stop the march. Protests are a regular thing in Istanbul and across Turkey every year on International Labor Day. Taksim Square is often the focal point, especially because of what happened there on May 1, 1977, when 34 people were killed during a demonstration. And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. China's President Xi Jinping visited Shanghai and called for the city to accelerate efforts to turn itself into a technological and innovation hub with global influence, according to state news agency Xinhua. President Xi also urged the city to expand its exploration of AI models and said more supportive policies for the technology should be rolled out as he visited an incubation lab for AI startups and tried on a set of smart glasses. Although Xi did not reference the trade war started by U.S. President Donald Trump during his visit, the implicit message was clear. China can develop its own leading technology and has alternative markets. Xi's Shanghai trip, his first to China's main international financial hub since November 2023, comes at a time when the tariff fight with the U.S. has raised the stakes for global economic growth. And as Beijing pursues AI development in the wake of the global success of Chinese AI startup DeepSeek. The Los Angeles Lakers, who entered the Western Conference playoffs with considerable momentum, saw their season cut short last night. The Minnesota Timberwolves defeated them in Game 5 to win the series. Let's go to Eva Basalyahe in Los Angeles with the details.
Game 5 Lakers versus the Timberwolves sees LA eliminated from the playoffs. Despite being the odds-on favorites, the mighty Los Angeles squad could not overcome Minnesota's surging momentum. For most of the contest, the Lakers had no answer for the Wolves' active hands and hustle plays, outscoring LA 31-22 in the first quarter alone, with Minnesota at one point draining a trio of unanswered three-pointers. In the second, the Lakers made an impressive 11-2 run, but couldn't quite close the gap and headed into halftime still down 59-49. To the third we go, with LA finally showing signs of life, dropping 31 points to Minnesota's 22. The Lakers take their first lead of the game, but couldn't hold on to it and end the quarter still down by 1. The fourth quarter saw a flurry of lead changes, but ultimately Minnesota's fearless attacks at the rim proved decisive. The Timberwolves beat the Lakers 103-96.
Certainly disappointed and not something that I ever envisioned with this team, having to go in and talk to them, after losing the first round. But give Minnesota a lot of credit. They're a really good basketball team.
Every season that I did not make it to the finals or did not win a championship has been a disappointment. So it'd be the same for me, it'd be the same off season of disappointment and unfulfillment, have an opportunity, to play longer and give yourself an opportunity to play for the Larry O'Brien Trophy. So nothing changes for me.
For now, the purple and gold lights at Crypto.com Arena are dimmed as LA heads into the break to rest, reflect, and when the time is right, gear up for the start of another thrilling NBA season. Reporting from the Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles, California, Eva Basalyahe for NET25 World News.
Boston Dynamics' advanced humanoid robot Atlas is set to begin trial operations in Hyundai Motor Group's U.S. manufacturing facilities later this year, marking a significant step in integrating cutting-edge robotics into automotive production. The all-electric Atlas, capable of performing complex tasks like sorting car parts and maneuvering heavy loads, will be deployed at Hyundai's Meta plant in Georgia to test its capabilities in real-world factory settings. Atlas, unveiled in its electric form in April 2024, showcases elite athletic abilities, including running, crawling, and cartwheeling, enabled by custom-designed motors. Take a look.
Like once we realized that we could design our own motors that would get us in the ballpark of elite athletes with a humanoid, that made it pretty exciting for us. And you might ask, well, why do we need to build elite athlete humanoids? And it's a very fair question. And we think that a lot of the jobs that you might want a humanoid to actually do are the kind of jobs where it's basically backbreaking labor for a person to do. These are really challenging, ergonomically unfit tasks that we ask people to do or need people to do right now. And we think that robots will be much better suited for those. So if you build a robot that is not only able to walk around and move two hands around in space, but it can, if needed, pick up a heavy load and move it around and do that for long durations of time, that'll just be strictly more valuable. Definitely, there's been some shifts in how we think about programming robots due to advancements in AI over the last several years. So figuring out how to bridge that gap so that we can take some of the smart reasoning, generalization capabilities of VLMs and things like this that are making their way into everyone's lives and apply that to physical intelligence on robots is sort of where the big research questions are. And if we do make progress in that in the next couple of years, that could be a real game changer. We all expect that the inevitable future is that robots, maybe not exactly like Atlas, but with the kind of capabilities that Atlas has, will be in our homes at some point. We expect that that's a pretty long horizon because I think the performance requirements for such systems are going to be quite high. There's real safety considerations there. And then there's just a lot of generalization probably required to actually perform tasks well in the home. And so I think that's inevitable. It's not what we're betting on for short term. So we have plans for later this year, putting Atlas into the Hyundai facility in the United States, just as a way to really prove out the current capabilities of the robot in the real context of the tasks that we care about solving over the next several years. So that's an important part of the development. But I also think that the development horizons for humanoids are going to be relatively long. Certainly, things like the rare earth materials ban and things like this are going to be quite challenging if you want to, assemble batteries and things like this, right? So it's certainly the case that we won't be immune to any of these issues. And so we're hoping that we come to some fast resolution so that we don't have to continue to navigate it.
But we really designed it to be a very high performance machine. And so we're interested in, again, being able to explore the very frontier of what's physically possible in humanoids, and everything, all the infrastructure that we built around doing that, I think is a real accelerant that shows itself through the performance of Atlas already.
It's capable of all of the agility that HD Atlas had, but probably even more than HD Atlas.
And before I go, I would like to greet Brother Angelo Manalo. A very happy birthday po. From the bottom of my heart, again, happy birthday po sa inyo. And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.